At the beginning of every season, well, almost, the Formula One circus descends upon Melbourne for the Australian Grand Prix, held around the picturesque location of Albert Park. It has played host to the Grand Prix since 1996 and draws an enormous crowd every year that it goes there. Like, seriously, it's nuts. Once you're in that crowd on Sunday, you can barely move. To go for a bottle of water is to forage through a dense jungle of protein and phone zombies. But while it is a good facility, and it has become a staple of the calendar, especially at the start of it, is this Australia's best racetrack? Nah, not even close. So why don't Formula One race on Australia's best racetrack? What exactly is stopping them? And why is it pretty much certain that they will never race at that track? Well, there is a pretty damn good reason for that. Every single year, over the Blue Mountain Range in deep New South Wales, festivities are in the air. In early October, thousands upon thousands of Australia's finest specimens will descend upon the town of Bathurst to bear witness to the Bathurst 1000 endurance race, one of the best races in all of racing. For racing fans on this side of the globe, this is our mecca. For everyone else, this event could be best described as Bogan Christmas. Why is it called that? Well, have a look at these interesting creatures. Natural selection's got some powerlifting to do here, I'll tell you that for free. Then again, one does not necessarily need brain cells to see the appeal of this race, and especially the track that it is raced on. Mount Panorama. It twists and bends through the landscape, carving its way through the hillside and providing a challenge for any soul brave enough to tackle it. It's fast, it's challenging, and most of all, it is completely unforgiving. But when you do nail a lap on this track, there are few places in the world that could possibly rival the euphoria that you would feel. To be perfect here is driving nirvana, and only those with the nerve, the skill, the tenacity required to win here will actually win. This place does not allow frauds to succeed. As a viewer, watching the best of the best throw their cars around at over 200 kilometers an hour over the top of the mountain, skimming the walls, and occasionally throwing their cars up onto two wheels, qualifying laps here are always a must watch. Without any shadow of doubt, this is the best racetrack in the country and one of the absolute best in the entire world. So why the hell then don't Formula One ever come here? Well, technically they have. In 2011, Jenson Button took on this place in a McLaren MP423, and in 2023, Liam Lawson drove around in a Red Bull RB7. But both of these were merely demo runs. How's about a proper championship round? Part of the calendar, the host for the actual Australian Grand Prix. And hey, this actually would have been a good idea in the 1950s, or the 60s, or even the 70s. But in 2024, yeah, about that. Now, in order for a racetrack to even be considered to host a Formula One race, it has to be brought up to FIA Grade 1 spec if it wasn't already designed for that in the first place. A big part of it all is down to the pit facilities, crowd capacity, and the safety of the track itself. The pit lane complex at Bathurst right now is pretty decent and wouldn't require that much of an overhaul if you were looking to bring it up to scratch. The paddock area as well is pretty sizable and can already host international events as it is. Crowd capacity likewise is pretty decent. Many vantage points around the circuit and plenty of space to put up temporary grandstands if need be. But that last bit, you know, the part about the safety. Okay, so basically, Grade 1 tracks must not be shorter than 3.5 kilometers and no longer than 7. This track right now is 6.2, so all's is good there. No straight on the circuit can be longer than 2 kilometers, which again gets a pass. Barely, and the first corner on the racetrack must be at least 45 degrees in direction change and be at least 250 meters from the start-finish line, which again, this does meet. Again, barely. But that's kind of where the good news ends. From here, things start to go a little bit south. The rules dictate that the track width must be at least 12 meters at all times, and as you can can see, there are plenty of times where this behemoth is barely wide enough for one car. There are also sections of track, such as the cutting, skyline, and the dipper, where the change in elevation is so extreme that it would never likely be approved by the FIA for Formula 1 cars. But let's say they invoked force majeure, that for argument's sake, the track is what it is, that it has been there for almost a century, and that they would be prepared to look past the track width issue and the roller coaster elevation just so long as the runoffs and the barriers were brought up to scratch. Well, installing tech bro barriers around a racetrack is one thing, but extending the runoffs around this track, well, that ain't exactly a cakewalk. For you see, this track is technically a street circuit. You see, all of this track you see here is public road. So if you wanted to drive around it, you can just go in your car pretty much every day of the year. And there are multiple properties on said road. A lot of land here is private, and so extending the runoff in some areas would necessitate going to some of these locals and saying, "Hey, we want to bring Formula 1 here. You need to choose between your lawn or your family. You have 24 hours. But of course, most of the bottom half of the racetrack is pretty fine in terms of the depth of runoff. You might need to pave over a couple of them, but the real problem areas lay at the top of the mountain. And to make the runoffs that you would need would require either moving heaven and earth just to get a measly 5 meters worth, or straight up making land, considering there did be a massive drop on one side of the road all the way up the top. We could just remove the barriers up there and let the drivers take their chances and deal with the consequences, but we don't have time for rational solutions. The runoff in areas such as the chase are gonna have to be completely paved over, sparing into the gravel trap at 220 miles an hour. With this elevation change, there's kind of a good chance that the car could pitch into the turf and throw itself into the air. Curbs all around the track would have to be reprofiled, since these modern day F1 cars just wouldn't be able to take the height of some of them, could easily cause them to lose traction, throw the car sideways, and pitch them into the wall. Speaking of reprofiling, you probably would have to reprofile a couple of the corners as well, opening them up to make passing easier. The bumps are pretty rancid too for open wheel race cars, and the drainage system around here, well, that sucks too. I mean, seriously, do you really see F1 drivers being okay with racing in these rivers? You could technically iron out these bumps by repaving the track, which does tend to happen every decade or so, but even Conrod Straight has a degree of camber on it, which, if a team wanted to run their car low enough, could see it dragging its ass along the ground like a dog with worms. Now that's a lovely thought. And on top of all that, you gotta remember that this track is out in the sticks a bit. Bathurst is a decent sized town and all, but with it being almost 3 hours drive from the closest international airport, that probably wouldn't be very appealing to the F1 fraternity, who typically want to be back in Monaco before the peasants have had a chance to even leave the circuit. But of course, even if you did do all of this and bring it up to spec, which is bound to cost $1 or $2, by the way, you must remember something here. This is Australia, and this town is quite inland. The stereotypes that you hear about become more and more true out here. Thus, almost every year, this track will throw drivers a bit of a curveball in the form of Skippy. Yeah, as comical as it sounds, it ain't uncommon to see kangaroos jump onto a live racetrack at this place. Is the race on the line? Do you have a lap record in the bag? That don't matter to them. They hop where they wanna hop. Situational awareness is not really a thing with these things. Touring cars can barely avoid them. What do you think's gonna happen when one jumps out in front of an F1 car? If that somehow seems a little bit tame, if you want some nightmare fuel, some races here have been briefly stopped when trackside marshals were bitten by snakes. Oh yeah, and those tire barriers that you see there, they will have redback spiders lurking inside them. And hey, it's New South Wales, so the funnel web spider will be lurking too. So you'll have roos on the track, snakes under your feet, and spiders in the shitters. And of course, the most deadly, dangerous, most horrifying creature that Australia has to offer, the echidna. Sure, most Formula 1 drivers would be able to handle a lap around this track perfectly fine, not him, but with the narrowness, the speed, the bumps, if a car snaps sideways virtually anywhere around here, they'll still be cleaning up the mess come Monday. The stakes are just too high at a place like this. It's barely tolerable for eligible racing cars nowadays. And of course, to bring this up to scuff, to make this track suitable for Formula 1 would be to destroy the very soul of this place, its appeal, its USP, the very thing that makes this place special. Every October, when Bogan Christmas arrives, they all come to watch the best in the country tackle one of the trickiest racetracks in the entire world, dancing on the edge of doom, risking life and limb just to prove that they're a little bit faster than the other ones. It's for those reasons that Formula 1 will never race here. Ever. And frankly, it's all for the better. So, if not Bathurst, are there any other tracks that would be at least better than what we have right now at Albert Park? Well, they do have Phillip Island. It's a gorgeous racetrack, a fun racetrack. It already ticks a lot of boxes for Grade 1 approval, and it does already host MotoGP races. I guess an updated pit facility would kind of be needed, a better pit building, and definitely a wider pit lane, a better public road to the circuit, an international airport, moors for Big Daddy Stroll's yacht. Yeah, this is just nitpicking. In terms of safety, this is leagues ahead of Bathurst. Not that that's hard, with large runoff areas that do arrest the momentum of out-of-control cars. Most of the time. Yeah, let's just keep this damn thing in Melbourne.